All right, we're now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Gwen Whistler. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee of the Asheville City Council. Welcome to our April 20th remote meeting. All council and committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through holding these committee meetings a bit differently. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. For those of you out there today, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 5257. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. When you would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Please remember to mute your microphone when you're finished speaking. So I'm going to introduce the council members. Councilwoman Turner, if you just say a brief hello.
Good afternoon.
And we're expecting Councilwoman Kilgore to join any minute. We've got City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Hello.
We've got our newly appointed Chief Financial Officer, Tony McDowell. And Tony, I promise I will not say that ever again.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody.
And we've got our Water Resources Director, David Melton.
Good afternoon.
And we've got Taylor Floyd, our Budget Manager.
Good afternoon.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so the first thing we've got is the CFO update. So I'll turn it over to Tony.
Thanks, Councilmember Weisler, and good afternoon, everybody. So this is the first Finance and Human Resources Committee meeting in a very long time. So we're just going to jump right in with a couple things on the CFO update. The first is to introduce new finance employees or finance employees who are in a different role. So I guess I'll go first since I'm in a different role. And so I'm Tony McDowell. Good to meet you all. I'm the new finance director. I've been with the city for 22 years. North Carolina native, grew up in High Point, have lived in North Carolina my whole life except for a couple of years that I was on the West Coast living in Seattle. So excited about the new role and excited to work with you all moving forward. And I told the other folks who were going to introduce themselves that we had to do one fun fact as we were doing this. And so my fun fact is, and some of you may know this already, but I got to a couple of years ago, play ping pong against Woody Harrelson, the actor. Gwen's nodding; she's aware of that. And he kicked my butt. He was really good. He beat me 3 games in a row, and they weren't even close. So anyway, so that's my fun fact, and I'll pass it off now to Caleb Lippard. He's our new controller, and as we move forward, you'll be hearing in future meetings likely from Caleb as well as Holly Ohm, who's also going to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like Tony said, I'm Caleb Lippard. Coming to the city of Asheville from the city of Newburgh in Oregon, where I was the assistant finance director there for about 12 years. Being a smaller city, that position kind of oversaw pretty much all the operations of our finance department. And as a part of that, I actually sat on we had a citizens rate review committee that met every 2 years to set water rates, stormwater, wastewater rates. So I'm pretty familiar with that, and oversaw our annual audit, oversaw capital projects, kind of you name it. I had my feet in about everything. And fun fact, maybe not necessarily fun, but funny. I called Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, my home for about 10 years, growing up through junior high and high school. And so I was there during the Gulf War. And where we lived, they did send Scud missiles that were all intercepted by Patriot missiles. But the one that hit closest to home was actually on the compound we lived in, thankfully out in the desert. And I slept through the whole thing. It was very loud, but I'm a pretty sound sleeper. It's nice to meet you all.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Caleb. Nice to meet you. Hello, I'm Holly Ohm. I'm the accounting supervisor. I've been with the city for a little over 2 years and have been the supervisor since January permanently and interim since August. I've been in Asheville for about 11 years. Prior to being at the city, I was an internal auditor at Mission Hospital and worked with financial reporting at Home Trust Bank and Ingalls. My fun fact is not nearly as interesting as Tony or Caleb's, but I guess probably about 12 years ago, I auditioned for the TV show The Amazing Race, and I got to the second round. I almost got to the final round to be on the show, but I didn't.
Well, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And Holly, we just want to recognize how much amazing work you did on the audit and know that you really stepped in and we really, really appreciate all your work.
Well, thank you.
We appreciate everybody's work, but I know that you really, took it on.
Oh, well, thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah, Holly definitely stepped up during the audit period when we had a lot of turnover, as you all know, and just did a great job getting us across the finish line. And then Caleb came in right at the end, and we finally got it all wrapped up. We're getting ready to kick it off again here real soon.
Yeah, we'll get it all straightened out.
All right. So the other thing we were going to cover under the CFO update was talking about a permanent meeting time for the Finance and HR Committee, since we assume at least we're going to be having these on somewhat of a regular basis moving forward. So Beth tells me we need to have a conversation about setting a time and date. So I'll turn it back over to you all to discuss that.
Can we wait? I may kick that back to the end when Sandra joins, just because I think it's going to be a little weird for Sage and I to make that decision without Sandra. So we may have to kind of offline this if Sandra is unable to join us today. But I know that's what we need to figure that out.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that.
What do you have anything else, Tony?
No, I do not have anything else.
Okay. Okay, so we'll move to the water fee adjustments. And so we've got David Melton and Tony McDowell tag team in this one.
All right. Well, good afternoon again, folks. I think Beth's going to pull up some slides that we put together for you all. And we combined this agenda item and the next one, which is a general fund fee review, general fund and parking and transit. All the non-water fees are in the second part. And Taylor Floyd, our budget manager, is going to walk you all through that. But David Melton and I will cover the first part on the water fees. So Beth, you can go to the next slide. So again, kind of a breakdown of the presentation. We're going to do it in two parts. We're going to talk about the water rate realignment, and then Taylor will cover the other fees. On the water rates, we're going to talk about their capital improvement fee and the court settlement that eliminated that fee and the impact it had on us from a revenue perspective. We're going to review the rate realignment plan that we included with the staff report that went out last week for you all. And then at the March 23rd council meeting, you all had requested some additional information about our water customer classes, kind of a rate history and some comparison to other cities. And we'll share some information that we have found on that as well. All right, next slide. So on the water rate realignment, you can go to the next slide, Beth. So just to kind of give you all a little background, the water fund, Water Resources Fund is our largest enterprise fund. It has a budget of between $30 and $40 million. It's a very complex operation with substantial capital, debt, and operating costs. And because it is its standalone enterprise system and it issues its own debt that's backed by its own revenues, it gets a separate debt rating from Standard & Poor's and Moody's that's separate from the general fund debt. And so right now that debt rating is a AA1 for the debt that we issue in the water fund. And one of the things that impacts that debt rating is a debt coverage ratio. And so what the debt rating agencies do when they look at our water system and they look at our rates, they want to make sure, they want to see that our rates are covering not only our capital and operating costs, but also providing some cushion above and beyond what our annual operating costs are in order for us to meet some of the debt sufficiency ratings or debt sufficiency rating requirements that they have of us in order to maintain that AA1 rating. So because of that, we employ a consultant, Raftalis, and I should have introduced these folks before I got started, but we do have two folks on the line from Raftalis today, Melissa Levin and Vanessa Waller, and they helped us develop the rate recommendations that you all are going to see in a little bit. And if you all ask too tough of questions on the technical side that David and I can't answer, we'll probably turn it over to them to answer. But they helped us tremendously to develop the rate recommendations that we're going to be sharing with you all in a few moments. But just to kind of give you all an idea, so on an average basis, the water fund spends about $11 million on capital. They do often have some larger debt or larger projects that require us to issue debt. The North Fork Dam project is a great example of that. It's about a $40 million project that's going to be finishing up soon. And we're going to be going out most likely this fall to issue the final debt for that project. We also have another fairly large project coming up in the next few years, and it's to replace all of our meters. And that's about a $20 million project. So we do anticipate issuing debt for that project as well. Next slide. So just a little history on the water CIP fee. It was a fee that was implemented in the early 2000s. So prior to the early 2000s, when I actually first started here at the city, the water system was governed by a regional structure. There was a regional water authority, Buncombe County and the city of Asheville all had to approve the budget each year for the water system. And that governance structure was in place until the early 2000s when the city took full control of the system and full control of the budget. And because of that kind of unique governance system, there had been some difficulty over time to make rate adjustments to address some of the capital needs that the system had. And so the city took over the system in the early 2000s. We were facing some fairly significant capital needs. And so in December of 2007, we issued $39 million in debt to begin to take care of some of that backlog of capital needs. And as a part of that, we put in place what was called the CIP fee, the capital improvement fee. And that fee was put in place to fund not only that debt issuance from 2007, but also to provide some funding for ongoing pay-as-you-go capital needs. And the fee that was put in place was modeled after a similar fee that the Metropolitan Sewerage District was charging at the time. And it was based on the size of the meter. So the larger the meters, larger users paid a higher fee than residential or single-family users. Next slide. So that fee was in place from 2007 up until the end of last fiscal year. And at that point, I think as you all know, and this is a slide from our March 23rd presentation, but there was a Supreme Court ruling around capital improvement fees and impact fees that led to a number of lawsuits being filed around the city against various water systems in various cities. And Asheville was not immune to that. We were a part of that, and we actually had two lawsuits that were directed at the city of Asheville. And Beth, you can go to the next slide. So the city of Asheville settled those lawsuits without any admission of liability. As a part of that settlement, we agreed to discontinue charging the capital improvement fee. And so in fiscal year 20 was the last year. And so in fiscal year 2021, the year we're in right now, we haven't been charging that fee. And that ended up impacting the water fund in terms of lost revenue to the tune of about $7.5 million. So what we did was since this fiscal year started, we've been working with our financial consultants at DEC, as well as our rate consultants at Raftalis to begin developing a plan that will allow us to recover that revenue over time. So I'll just stop here before we kind of get into the specifics of the recommendation to see if you all have any questions or comments on kind of the background information related to the water fee. Okay, seeing none, we can move on. Okay, so the proposal that we shared with you all last week, we're calling it a rate realignment proposal, and it begins to recover the lost revenue over time through a combination of adjustments to our base fee as well as the volumetric or user fee. And the base fee adjustments are based on meter size. So larger meters will have a larger base fee. And again, all this information is in the handout that we provided that was attached to your staff report. The volumetric rates for next year, what we've proposed is an increase of approximately 6% for all customer classes except for the wholesale class. And we can talk a little bit about the reasons for that if you all would like. And the proposals that we're looking at for next year would generate approximately $3.5 million in revenue. So again, we're not looking to recover the full $7.5 million in next fiscal year, but again, we're going to kind of phase in that revenue recovery over a number of years. Next slide. So one of the things you all had asked about at the work session was kind of an overview of our customer classes and how many of our water users are residential versus commercial versus manufacturing. And I think as David pointed out during the work session, by far and away the largest customer class is residential. We have about 90% of our overall customers, overall connections are residential. And so when we start talking about recovering that lost revenue from the elimination of the CIP fee, the bulk of that recovery is going to fall upon the residential rate users simply because they are the largest component of our customer classes. Next slide. We also talked a little bit at the work session about what our approach has been over the last few years in terms of trying to adjust rates, particularly rates on non-single family users. We've been adjusting those at a higher percentage than we have for commercial and manufacturing users. And so that approach and I may have misstated that, but we've been approving rate adjustments for single family users that were at a lower percentage rate than we have for commercial users. That may be, looking at the slide now, that may be backwards from what we were trying to say there. But you can see from the rate increases in FY20 what we proposed then, and this is kind of an example of the kind of increases that we had over the last 10 years or so, is that single family, manufacturing, and small commercial user rates have been going up at a slower rate than our multifamily residential and our large commercial users. So another question you all asked at the work session was, how do our rates compare to other cities? And so David did a little research on this, so I may let him kind of talk us through this slide.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I did research through the UNC School of Government's financial site, and we're probably a little bit below average as far as the median household income of $45,000 to $50,000, which is about where Asheville's at. Asheville's a little bit towards the upper end of that, around 48, 49 as the median. Then I also did a search statewide, and we're a little below average there. Basically, for the median home income, we're at about, if you broke it down on a monthly basis, we're about $31.71 with what we're proposing, and the average is $43.16, and that's including base fees, volumetric for the average user. Then when I compared to utilities statewide, the average is about $75.53. So I think we're very comparable in these statistics.
We can go to the next slide, Beth. So, and this was the information we shared with you all a few weeks ago. So with the rate adjustments that we're proposing for next year, the single family residential user, the average user in FY20 prior to the capital improvement fee being eliminated was paying about $65.38. With the elimination of the capital improvement fee, that bill dropped to $56.86. And with what we're proposing for next year, the bill would go back up to around $63, but it would still be less than what the average user was paying 2 years ago. So just kind of a quick summary of the rate realignment plan, then we'll be happy to answer any questions. What we're proposing meets the legal requirements of our settlement, our lawsuit settlement. It's minimizing the burden on customers by spreading the revenue recovery over time, as opposed to trying to recover all the lost revenue in one fiscal year. And it meets, we worked with Raftalis, we worked with our financial consultants at DEC to come up with a plan that not only meets the operating and capital needs, but also allows us to meet those all-important rating agency debt coverage ratios that we talked a little bit about. So with that, I think that's the last slide of this section. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that you all might have about the water rate plan.
The question I would have, and I felt like I asked this before, but maybe I didn't. Can you do you have a sense of what MSD rates have been over the past 10 years, like their increases versus the city water rates increases?
I don't have that information, David. I don't know if you have that, Andy. I did reach out to MSD prior to this meeting to see if they had any information on what they're considering for next year's fees, and they don't as of yet. So we don't know what they're planning for next year. But David, do you have anything on in terms of history?
That's the same information I've been getting too. They're kind of in process to figure out which way they're going to go. So I'm with you on that. I don't have a lot of information.
And we don't have history of what what they've charged versus water, because I think most people probably don't they probably don't understand that MSD and the Asheville City water system is different. And so I'm just wondering how that stacks up. I'm on the MSD board, and now last year I do not believe MSD had an increase in the fee, but pretty routinely the fee goes up 1 3/4 to 2 1/4 every year to keep up with capital needs. And so I think we should kind of be monitoring that, only because I think that our citizens sort of think of us as one entity. I've been hearing a little bit about this proposed increase, and people, aren't happy about it, but I don't think that we probably did a fabulous job of telling them that they got a year of substantially reduced rates, and that, this is actually not even going to be as much as they paid 2 years ago. But so I guess I would encourage us to tell that story that, we're trying to be, we need to make sure we have a healthy water system for sure. And we have a lot of certainly capital needs. And I'm sure anyone who has lived in this city understands that. But, I think let's tell this story that, we're trying to be sensitive, especially in the pandemic situation. Councilwoman Turner, did you have any other questions?
No, I think you're right. Telling the story matters, because I don't know that we, really told the story of reducing it temporarily. And also, the pandemic has changed so much about how we operate. But just before the pandemic, we had outrageous water issues and groundwater issues, and reminding folks that they were really looking to us to be responsible for those breaks, be responsible for the repairs, to look down the road and handle it better. So maybe that's part of the story. I appreciate how you all tried to balance it so that this year didn't feel like an increase overall over the last couple of years. But I'm curious, so we're just for process sake for my new eyes, so we will revisit this each year, because in previous slides I've seen several years in the uptick, but we're just talking 1 year. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, this committee, Sage, looks at fees. We look at it first, and then we make a proposal to the the entire city council, but we look at fees every year. I mean, sometimes there's sort of a framework that, you know, sort of says this is what we're anticipating in the future, but it's not really locked and loaded until we and then council votes on it.
Okay. And I wonder
and
if
the reason we do it early is so that you can kind of, you know, let people know ahead of time before July 1st that a fee change is coming up.
And it looks like that fee wouldn't go until September, so we're really good 5 months ahead. I wonder, when this comes to council, will you be able to bring us some examples of the impact to the commercial customer?
Yeah, we can. And some of that information was in the attachment to the staff report. I don't know if you all had a chance to look at that yet, but we can certainly add some slides that highlight that information.
When I'm looking at the staff report, and it does great for the residential, like the little chart, the fiscal impact chart will be helpful for commercial. The only other comment that I have, this is kind of an abstract thought, you know, with so much going on with rental assistance, utility assistance, and unemployment increases and stuff, I mean, I guess, does it make sense to not have raised the rate as much as we would have this year while people are also getting assistance? I mean, it's tough. It's like on the one hand, everyone's really struggling, but then we also have extra supports for folks. Was any thought put into that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously thought about that and thought about the impact on the customers. I think one of the things we've heard from our consultants is that, like I said, the debt rating around the water system and the fact that when the CIP fee went away, that was about 20% of the overall revenue for that fund. And so if we don't begin implementing a plan to recover that revenue, there is the potential that our debt rating agencies would lower the rating on the debt the next time we go out for debt, and that we would be doing that this fall to take out the debt on the dam project that I mentioned earlier. So that's kind of the risk we run if we don't pass a rate increase in the current year.
I guess I meant the opposite. So if we're only at 75% of the goal, you know, and I'm not saying that customers need to pay more, but there is more assistance. I just wondered if that was factored in.
Yeah. Councilmember Turner, I thought that was your question. And we certainly considered this approach of trying to recapture that loss as quickly as possible. But as you will see in the next presentation, there will be other increases. And so we really wanted to look at the cumulative impact of all of the increases that will be made, including a reval year for most property owners. So there's just a lot of increases that potentially could impact our residents this year. So we're trying to be as sensitive as possible.
I appreciate that. Thank you. No more questions for me.
Tony, would you want us to vote on this, to recommend this to council? Is that next? Is that our action step?
Yep, that's the action step. And we would be bringing this to council on May the 11th for you all's consideration. And I'll just add quickly, I think Taylor is working on getting some data put together on the history for the MSD fee. I think that might be something we already had on our to-do list. So hopefully we'll have that information soon.
Okay.
We have a suggested motion here. Would you like me to motion?
Yes, I do need a motion, and I think I just saw Sandra join.
Me too. Yeah, I think she's in there.
Welcome,
Okay.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
I am sorry, ladies.
So
can you hear me?
We're going to immediately ask you to vote on the water. Hopefully you read the information ahead of time. So I have a motion to accept the staff's proposal for the change in the water rates. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Wait.
Well, I thought you were taking over the motion. I can move. Do you want? Okay. I made the motion. You want a second? Sorry.
Or Sandra, do you want to second it? Maybe not.
Kind of awkward.
Okay, I'll second that motion, and then I will. So I'll go through and do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Aye.
Thank you.
Here.
Councilwoman Turner? Gotcha. Thank you.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So thank you very much, and appreciate all the work that went into this, and, you know, being responsive to the situation considering the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And I'll turn it over to Taylor and the rest of staff to walk us through the other fees.
Okay. And just for all the thousands of people that are watching out there, we are now on the item number 3, which is other city fee adjustments, and Taylor Floyd will take this over.
Thank you very much. Have a few slides to get started that are a little bit of review, so I'll try to move through those quickly. First is just a little bit about why we charge for service and the factors we use to set fees and charges. You know, why we charge is really primarily based on who derives the primary benefit of that service. We also charge to ensure access to a service, and parking is a good example of that. If we didn't charge for parking downtown, there probably wouldn't be very much of it. So, you know, that's critical in some instances. We also charge based on statutory or other legal requirements, and the previous conversation around the water rates is probably a really good example of a place where some of our fees are pushed by those kind of requirements. Then when we start looking at how we set the fees and charges, one important part is how much, like what the cost of that service is and how much of that cost we want to recoup. We like to think again about who benefits. We're likely going to charge more for fees that have a really direct customer benefit instead of that broader community benefit. So we may charge higher for a development review, as an example. And then we also use consultants to help give us a framework to make these decisions. And we've done that fairly recently with parks and recreation fees as well as development fees. So next slide. Looking at the general fund, I think you all probably are tired of seeing this particular donut chart, but it's important. You know, most of our revenue in the general fund comes from property and sales taxes. Fees and charges fall into that other category in the top. It's not that whole category. It's somewhere around $14 million. So it's not a driver, I would say, in the general fund revenues, but it's still significant. And that is, if you go to the next slide, sort of the opposite of how things are for enterprise fund revenues. You can see that fees and charges make up almost 80% of the revenues for our enterprise funds. So sort of the opposite story with those. So moving into some of our specific changes. And we tried to give some detail here, but there's much more in the staff report. But these are all of the new fees that we're recommending for adoption. And those include changes to account for an additional step to go to the Historic Resources Commission for review of subdivisions in historic districts, to align fees in the river, downtown, and new hotel design review districts. So that's kind of that second group there. And then last, to reinstate some sidewalk fee in lieu where building sidewalks or these other items is impractical or unfeasible. So I'll stop briefly if there are any questions on any of these before I move on.
Taylor, when you said reinstate the fee in lieu, help me out with that.
So we have not been charging those recently, and I believe if Ken Putnam may be able to answer that question in greater detail than I can if he is on.
I'm here and I can answer. Oh, or Ken.
Or Shannon, sorry.
That's okay. So we had for many years charged a sidewalk fee in lieu. But then there was some concern under our former city attorney had some concern about that, that we weren't authorized per state statutes to do it. So we stopped that practice for about a year or two. And then with the adoption or the adoption of the new 160D land use chapter of the general statutes, it made it more clear that cities can be authorized to charge a sidewalk fee in lieu. So we are now reinstating that because it was a fairly popular option for developers. So we thought it was worth bringing back.
Shannon, this is when they are not physically able to produce the sidewalk due to other hardships in terrain or site, right?
Primarily, yes.
Yeah.
And just to remind me, Shannon, I appreciate that. It's a staff decision to determine that it's not feasible. It isn't. A developer can't just say, well, I don't like sidewalks, so I'm just going to pay a fee.
That's
because obviously the goal is we'd like sidewalks.
Yes. So council members may recall one of the recent 160D amendments was addressing removing any opportunity for staff to make discretionary decisions. So when we did that update, we tried to do our best to provide sort of clear objective standards under which sidewalk fee in lieu would be an option. So it would be an administrative decision made at the staff level, but we did try to establish some very clear criteria for it.
So novice question here. These are all new, except for the sidewalk that we used to have. But otherwise, we didn't have a historic district subdivision review fee. We didn't have the 1,500 meter works, right?
We did not have a historic district subdivision review fee. That is new. But we did charge major works design review fees for downtown and the River Arts districts. But we're consolidating those rather than having two separate fees for those two areas. We're just saying all design review areas, which now also adds the hotel overlay district to it. So it's partially a cleanup, but then also adding hotels to the mix. We did add the minor works review. We had not previously charged for that. We added that, and that fee is consistent with what we charge for minor works review in our historic districts.
So the major works fee was, what was it, 1,500 before?
Yes.
Okay, so the dollar amount hasn't changed. Just location and the combination. Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before Taylor moves on? Okay, go for it.
Thanks. Yeah, one of the challenges of a lot of complex information on a slide, not much real estate to explain it all. So moving on to recommended changes, two kind of groupings here. The first is just an increase in the monthly advertising cost inside buses. That hasn't been updated since 2008, so just a small change there. And then the second one is an increase in nature center admissions, and that's primarily to cover the $150,000 donation that has been made in the last few years by the Friends of the Nature Center to support operations at the Nature Center. So I will pause again for questions.
Okay, help me out with the Nature Center. What you just said. Has they discontinued participating?
No, I'm here. I'm ready to present. I'm very excited to be here. Haven't seen you in a while.
I know, it's good to see you.
Yes, I miss coming to the Finance Committee meetings, but
I bet you do.
Yes, we are having pretty significant attendance at the Nature Center, I must say. We were closed for 6 months, and when we opened at the end of September, we have exploded, which is fantastic. As a matter of fact, we had our busiest week ever over spring vacation. So times are good, I must say. People are really enjoying getting out and getting to the Nature Center. Taylor mentioned the fee increase. When we did a 2015 analysis, remember we did a business plan for the next 10 years back in 2015. And I'm working with some groups that help zoos and nature centers and aquariums plan for their fee increases. The city finance department, actually Frank McGowan led that effort. We talked about where we need to be in the coming years. So we made an adjustment back in 2015 to get us to a certain level. And then the recommendation was 5 years later in 2020 to make another adjustment to get us to about where we should be. So last year with COVID, council decided not to make that change, which is completely understandable. And now that we're back and open and operational, we want to make that change to get to where the consultants' recommendations were back in 2015. So what we're proposing is to increase the non-city resident rate more than the city resident rates. And the reason for that is because you had asked about the Friends of the Nature Center. It's not that they're not contributing to the operational expense anymore, but we had discussed having their contributions go directly to our capital improvement line, so that when we have capital improvements that need to be made here, whether they be enhancements to existing facilities, new opportunities, guest amenities, those types of things, we have a capital account to pull that from, versus competing with the rest of Parks and Rec, or the city for that matter, that doesn't have a way of generating revenue. So Tony and Roderick and I met to talk a little bit about how we can do that. And one of the ideas was that in the future, when the Friends make that contribution, it goes into a restricted account for those improvements, so as not to tax, like I said, other facilities that can't necessarily generate a revenue. So that's the spirit of that. And again, it's to make the adjustment that was recommended when we did the analysis back in 2015.
Okay. So just to remind me, so what will the admission be for the city residents and for and the outside the city? And then the other question I had is, for a while the county was basically offsetting this idea that they were basically trying to make it so county residents paid the same as the city, and they sort of shared that with us. Is that still in place with the county, or have they discontinued that?
It's no longer in place with the county. The Friends of the Nature Center got a grant from the county in order to offset that. And what they would do is they would pay us back the balance of the resident versus non-resident rate in a quarterly payment. So the county, when they did their budget, they decided to not continue that. So now it's strictly for City of Asheville residents. And the differences would be the highest that a city resident would pay would be the adult rate, which would be $9.95. That would be the new rate. So we're still trying to keep it under $10. Currently it's $7.95. And then the highest that a non-resident would pay would be up to $13.95. So we would increase the non-residents rates higher than we would the city rates. And a lot of this too, the other reason why we want to make sure that we get this is, of course, we talk subsidy all the time and how important it is to offset a lot of what we're doing. But a lot of the initiatives we have are related to equity and inclusion. And we're trying to come up with a way to promote through the centers, through our other recreation centers, opportunities for those students and the members of the communities that go to those centers to come to the Nature Center at a reduced cost, and in some cases free. We're offering a city pass program so that they could come for free. So it's a way to offset the revenue from the folks that, shall we say, can afford to come, or coming from out of town. They should obviously help us support our mission for the residents of Asheville. And that's the whole idea behind when we did our business plan back in 2015, was to get us to that point so that we continue to decrease the amount that we need to be subsidized by council.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Do any council members have any further questions?
Just one question for you, Chris. So it sounds like you're collecting zip codes or something. What percentage of the folks that attend are actually from outside Asheville that visit?
That's a great question. And it's been pretty steady over the past 8 years. We really keep good track of our attendance. About 25% of all our attendance comes from within the city of Asheville. So 75% of our attendance comes from outside of the city. So by those guests coming to town, using the Nature Center, as an opportunity for recreation, it helps to subsidize our operation. And we are definitely a regional, in some cases, national attraction. Back in 2019, when we had a record-setting year, we saw people from every state except one, and we saw people from about 9 different countries. So this year, we're in the process of trying to get back on track, and it's looking pretty promising. We have a lot of new opportunities for people to engage here with us through various programs that we offer, like I said, through the centers and things to try to encourage new participation. but also to make sure that we continue to be the excellent destination for people coming from out of town. We are the primary place for people with families to come. We believe that we are the best place for people that have young children to come visit when they're in Asheville.
And you've got the red panda now.
I was going to say, how are our red pandas doing?
They are missing seeing city council members come out and visit. But they're doing
I'll come out and see them. I love them.
No, they're great. They're a huge attraction. Of course, we really appreciate city council voting about 5 years ago now. You'll remember when we brought them in to include them in our collection. It was a little outside of our normal realm of animals that live in the Southern Appalachians, but we were able to make a really good connection given the fact that they're historical, different species that were very closely related lived here at one time. So it's given us a chance to expand even more, and we're seeing record attendance as a result of those and other improvements we've made.
Any other questions from council?
I just wanted to question about the transit, not for Chris. So the signs, I mean, it's just, I don't know how much they were. Is this a huge increase, $7 and $33? Is this, I don't know how much percentage increase this is.
This is Ken Putnam, Sage. This is a very minor increase. I think, again, the rates haven't changed since 2008. And the biggest change that we made was when we decided to brand the buses on the outside. You know, we took away all the outside advertising that we used to have on that. So this is not a huge moneymaker, but it does help. And so we're just looking for opportunities wherever we can. And we consistently have usually the same people that advertise on a regular basis as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ken. And just, the current, for 1 month, for one interior sign, it's going from $20 to $27. And for interior ceiling signs, which I certainly cannot tell you the specifics of the difference between those two, is going from $100 to $133. And we do also offer a discount to nonpartisan nonprofit groups, as well as city-sponsored events and other city departments. So it is less for those groups.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next set. And these two were complex enough that we didn't put any numbers on the screen because it would have been really confusing. So I'll try to walk through kind of at a high level these two changes. So first, the fire safety inspections. Those inspections are required for all occupancies other than single family houses in the city. And the adjustments to the structure of the fees are really meant to realign the fees with the complexity of the inspection. And what that will end up meaning is some customers will see an increase and some customers will actually see a decrease in costs. And lastly, I do want to note that this fee change is going to support us implementing a new third-party billing that should streamline our internal staff work to do the billing and also provide some online payment options that should improve our collection rate for these fees.
Taylor, this is Gwen. Can a person who controls the individual building have any sort of effect on how complicated the inspection is, or is it just really based on the structure itself? I mean, is there a way for an individual to reduce their fee, like something they could do to, I don't know, clean it up, or is there?
I believe it's primarily based on the occupancy type and again, the kind of the size of the building. I think Kelly Hines might be on from the fire department that could probably, again, answer that in better detail than I can, or someone else from the fire department.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for the question. It's a great question. And what we mean by risk for certain occupancies, so like hazardous materials are only found in certain occupancies. So that takes more time and research to do in most cases. to perform that inspection. Same thing as like hospitals and other occupancy types that make it more complicated as an inspection to do, would take longer, and therefore the fees are more for those type occupancies.
So thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. But I think what I'm hearing is that before the inspection happens, you can kind of say this is going to cost $300 or $200 or $50 based on the nature of what you expect. I mean, it is. I guess my thing is do they know ahead of time sort of what the inspection number is going to be?
Who? Just for clarification, who are you saying is
whoever owns the building or controls the building?
Okay, so the building.
Or is it the kind of thing where you go in the building and all of a sudden you see that they have a ton of firewood or something? I don't know. I don't know what would cause it, but a ton of firewood, and you'd be like, oh, whoa, we're gonna have to look at this differently.
No, so the simplification of the inspection fees are based on occupancy type, and we're changing it to square footage, or in residential uses, which is an occupancy type, that will be based on number of units, so that the smaller ones fees are less than the large residential buildings that have been developed here of recent years that we've never had before. So one that has 100 units will be charged more than somebody with a 4-unit apartment house. So based on occupancy, we know what it is prior to going. It doesn't have anything to do with the number of violations or hazards that we find.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. I sort of stopped that in the middle of that sheet, the slide. Sorry, Taylor.
That's fine. That's fine. I stopped because I thought there might be some questions before we move into the next one. So the next set of fees are all around parking services, and there are several changes and adjustments, and I'll try to run through them sort of, again, at a high level. It's not all inclusive, but probably the primary one is increasing the hourly garage parking rate to $1 for the first hour and $2 for each additional hour, and upping the daily maximum to kind of align with that to $20. There's also some additional monthly garage parking options that include a 12-hour daytime access and an overnight weekend rate, and those vary depending on the garage. We're also lowering some monthly parking rates in surface parking lots, and adjusting rates for on-street monthly parking, as well as adding some additional street segments to that program. So more street segments that will have on-street monthly parking available. And then the last thing is not a fee change, but again, kind of part of this whole package is stricter enforcement of the on-street time limits. And all of that collectively, the intent is really to sort of encourage shorter-term parkers to use those on-street spaces and encourage turnover in those spaces so that there's more availability, and then kind of push some of the longer-term parking use to garages and the surface lots as well. And then ultimately, we're also expecting that additional revenue generated, again, primarily from that change in the parking in the garage rates to go towards capital maintenance in the parking garages.
Are there slides for these details? I know I saw them in the parking meeting, but are you showing more information other than this?
We were not, again, just because we had the fees or all of the detailed itemized stuff in the staff report.
Yeah, it's all in the
I've got it, yeah.
In the documents. The public has access to all the gory details. Any other questions? on this slide? Okay, Taylor.
All right. I think this is getting to the last one. And this is something that we have not done in the past that I'm aware of anyway. We're actually recommending a couple changes, not to be for adoption, but for a mid-year review in the next fiscal year. And we had proposals to increase the solid waste and stormwater fees. And what we'd like to do is spend some time during fiscal year, the next fiscal year after July 1st, reviewing these services and the needs that they have, because they are really significant. And the primary driver for not recommending these fees now is back to that earlier conversation during the water fee changes, is we're really trying to limit the impact of fee changes on our community, as we recover from the pandemic. So we know that, again, there are some really significant needs and both on the capital and operating side, especially in stormwater. But we're trying to hold off on those for the time being and have a more focused conversation about those services and the needs that they have, again, sometime probably in the fall or winter before we get into the budget discussion again for next year.
Okay.
And Gwen, Chairman, if I could just also add that we're also wanting to just take a little bit more time to study and make alignment between longer term needs, cost, and benefits, and how much of an increase would really make sense at this point in time, and what would that increase actually buy us from from either a capital perspective or service delivery perspective. And I just don't know that we are there yet. We need just a little bit more time to do that kind of analysis. But I do want to restate that we really will be coming back with a mid-year review after we have done our due diligence for you all's consideration. But we think we've got just a little bit more work to do.
So Deborah, thank you for that. So what, you think maybe September you'll come back and then maybe implement January 1, or?
I'm thinking we'll come back November or December and then implement sometime February or March if you all feel it's appropriate.
Okay.
And Tony, I think I may have interrupted you. Do you want to?
No, I think you said exactly what I was going to say, Deborah.
Okay. Taylor, do you have anything more?
I believe that's the last one. I think we're on to another question slide. So okay. I'm finished.
Councilwomen, what questions do you have?
I do have a couple, and I'm sorry that my timing, and I'm looking up the documents and making sure, because I just had a parking meeting. I actually have some about parking, and it's not about this last one. Is that okay?
Yes.
So I'm liaison.
Ask any questions.
I'm liaison to the Downtown Commission. We have a parking committee, and that committee met this week. There's a lot of concern coming from the businesses. So just historically, we used to have the first hour free, and then a couple years ago, we had an issue. We moved to the $1.25 and $2.50 for second hour if you go 61 minutes or something. And I'm wondering, I understand we need new hardware. It has a increment requirement. We're trying to get to whole dollars. I'm wondering if this is not a better time to do the first hour free and the second hour $2, because that's what we were doing. And we are still emerging from a pandemic. I love that some of these other pieces are layering in where the visitor won't stay over weekend, pay a longer rate. The visitor's daily cap might be a longer rate. And then it looks like we're doing this new half day rate, which could be for the workforce. So I love some of how we're pushing the fees. I just wonder if it doesn't make sense for us to consider doing that first hour free. And I don't know the impact to your numbers. I know this overall impact is a hopeful $500,000 increase in revenues, but I would like to know if that's something you could, maybe dig into a little before it comes to council, because we do need to get our locals back downtown. And I think that having that first hour free would help and would send a message that we still support them and want us to come back and reemerge and visit our downtown. And that is what the input from the committee was as well. So I'll share, they were worried about the increase on top of an increase. And so I'm sharing that input. And could someone tell me the daily cap in the garage currently is what, 12? Ken?
Garrett Mail is on and can probably answer that, or Ken.
Garrett,
yeah, it's currently 12.
And then the half day rate would become 12, is that right? Looking through
It would depend on the garage. We're proposing a 12-hour rate as well as what we're calling a sunset rate, which would be overnight weekday hours and all day Saturday and Sunday.
Okay. So, but the worker in some cases can still find the $12, or do they actually get a potentially cheaper if they're working 4 days a week? You've got it by, there's just a lot of numbers and sentences here, but I'm trying to see if providing additional monthly garage parking options for 12-hour daytime access would be $80 to $100 a month. And that is 5 days a week, 12 hours?
Correct.
Okay. So
yeah, the intention was to provide more options than we currently have today, which are essentially just 24-hour monthly parking or hourly parking, because we anticipated that there would be some concern over the hourly rate recommendation.
That's great. I'll also share with you all from that committee, we are experiencing something we've never had, which is extra garage spaces. I don't know, we haven't had them in a long time. We've had like a 600-person waiting list for a long time, and the folks over in transportation have been calling and chasing people, and now all of a sudden we have extra spaces. So I appreciate the work going on here to drum up more money. I do want us to consider the first hour free. That's
okay. Councilwoman Kilgore, do you have any further questions?
Well, only thing I can say is I'm in agreement with Sage with the first hour free. I think that definitely would encourage more activity, not only for the vendors there. I think people will be more apt to come downtown. So I definitely, in agreement with that.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to accept all of staff's recommendations except for the parking, and with the parking to make the adjustment to have the first hour in the parking decks free, at least for this next year, 2020 fiscal year 21-22. I would entertain that motion.
I will make that motion.
May I get a second?
Second.
Okay. I will do a roll call for that motion, and I'm going to. I hope that this is all subject to you don't come back and tell us that change would reflect a reduction of our increase in revenue by 600,000 or something. I mean, I think all subject to. We'd like to understand the revenue impact of that, but as long as it's something reasonable, I assume my fellow councilwomen would agree with that. So I'm going to go through a roll call vote. So Councilwoman Kilgore?
Yes.
Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. All right, so I think that concludes that, and this is recommendations to council. I mean, I'll adjust my, you guys know that, right? And then I will go ahead and open it up for public comment if there is anyone on there. Beth, is anybody want to talk?
No, we don't have any callers on the line.
Well, lovely. Okay. Oh, but before we adjourn, which maybe I should have done anyway, whatever. Staff would like us to come up with a permanent monthly meeting time and date. I don't know, Beth, if you want to give us some options. This is obviously the third Tuesday, but what are you thinking some options are? I think previously we used to have it the fourth Tuesday. But then it bumps up against, well, in the springtime, it always bumps up against the budget work sessions is the problem.
We were rescheduling it more frequently than we were having it at the regular time. Almost 75% of the time we were rescheduling it. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that time.
How about earlier on that Tuesday? You know, what would people
earlier
think
on
about,
that Tuesday, we may run into, the fourth Tuesday is public safety at 11.
Oh.
So there's a challenge with that.
And HCD as well, because I had that today.
Okay. Well, wait, not today. So now we're looking at the fourth Tuesday.
Yeah, the fourth Tuesday, public safety is at 11.
Okay. And our budget work sessions are usually
2:30.
Yeah.
I mean, and if this isn't a decision that the committee wants to reach today, that's okay. I just wanted to have the conversation. We have it currently listed as needed. If you want, it just gets difficult to schedule if we don't have a regular time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we shouldn't have any more budget work sessions after the 27th if that helps with the timing on that particular Tuesday.
Yeah, but it just, it's like if we set it up, then, the entire springtime always messes us up because we have budget.
Yeah, actually, when we were having it regularly, I mean, anytime there's a work session for anything, if we have housing, if we have it, I look back at it when we were rescheduling them so often, and that fourth Tuesday right before council, it almost always got rescheduled for interviews or work sessions.
Okay.
It's just not a great time. I mean, it might be different now that we're coming out of COVID, but it was not great then.
Right. Well, can I ask you to do this, Beth? Can you, sort of throw out some things? My preference would be that it be at least the week of a council session so that if there's ever any allowed travel as you're on city council, you can, do it on either the first or the third week. Can you throw out some times and then kind of check with the three members, and then we'll decide based on that? Do you?
Absolutely.
Because you know what the other meetings are and that kind of thing. So for us to be spitballing it, we have no idea what else is going on. Oh, I mean, we do have some idea, hopefully, but so if you wouldn't mind doing that, and we'll wrap our heads around that, if that's okay with the other council women.
Yeah, I'd love to add a little input that Mondays would be really hard for me. I was strategic in keeping all of my Mondays open in the first week of every month intentionally because of my job.
Right.
We can, not that you can cater to me, but if you can aim around there, that would be helpful. And thank goodness, guilty verdict, y'all.
Councilwoman Kilgore, do you have any dates or times that you are, you'd like to reserve?
No, I like the suggestion you had, as far as putting it in the, weekly columns where we can actually, have some more flexibility. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll look for info from Beth, and she will get back to us. Okay. All right. With that, I will adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.